Well, welcome everyone. Hello, hello. I am so excited about today's webinar because I have a very special guest, Leni Miller. So yes, welcome. Come on in, say hello in the chat. I love seeing where everyone's from. We've got South Africa and Canada and Minnesota and everywhere. So come on in, welcome, welcome. We have a very, very special program for you today. And I'm so grateful Leni's here and able to take the time with everyone. I'll do a quick introduction on myself, then I'm going to tell you about Leni. We'll do a few little logistics. So in case you don't know me, I'm Joan Burge. I'm founder and CEO of Office Dynamics International. And we are a global leader in the development and presentation of sophisticated training programs and information for administrative office professionals. And I'm happy to say we've been doing this for 30 years. This is our 30-year celebration. Woo! I can't believe it. So Leni and I actually have known each other for years, right, Leni? Way, way back. I don't even remember how we first met. But Leni and I have become especially close, I think, this past year, with everything happening with COVID, but also I had asked Leni a year ago if she would speak at our conference this year, and our theme is 2020 and beyond. We're really delving into the profession. And so we've had so many conversations, but I really feel the last few months our conversations have been critical. And what Leni has shared with me has certainly opened my eyes into the profession and what's happening. So I'm not going to take a lot of time because we just have to get her on here to share all her wisdom. So a few logistics. Number one, the learning session will be about 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it for questions because I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions for her today. You can submit your questions anytime during the webinar. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner by the chat there, you can actually click on an icon or somehow identify that you have a question. And that will help Malia pull your questions aside. So then later we can go through those quickly. If you have any technical issues, the only support we can give you is through the chat. So let us know. We have someone who is taking care of that. And we will send a replay link after the webinar. So let me briefly tell you about Leni, and then she'll expand on her expertise. Leni Miller is the founder and president of EA Search, LLC, a premier search firm specializing in senior level executive support. With over 30 years of experience and a passionate mission for finding the right support staff for individuals and leaders in all industries, Leni's high rate of success reflects her many years of expertise and effective assessment and matching of senior executive management with the most effective support staff. She's also written a book, something she's very, very passionate about, called Finding the Right Work. So welcome, Leni.
No, Joan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joan. Your enthusiasm is so contagious. I just always love being with you and am continuously inspired. Yes, I'm Leni Miller. I'm the founder and the CEO of EA Search. Just to tell you quickly, EA Search is a retained search firm, which means we do a lot of consulting along with recruiting, and we specialize exclusively in senior level executive support for CEOs, high profile individuals, and very high net worth people. So our role is really that of being a very sophisticated matchmaker at the highest level of executive and personal assistance. And it is a wonderful, wonderful thing that I feel, because I many times can't believe I get paid to do this, because I really love making those matches. I know how important the right support is for everybody, but especially for our leaders, especially for our people who are really operating at a complex lifestyle and business level. I just completed an article for the San Francisco Business Times, and I called it The Secret Sauce of Executive Success. And guess who that is? It's you. Because the most successful executives have the most efficient and highest level of support teams in their offices. So at any rate, I'm here to share time with Joan and with you. I'm going to look forward to answering a lot of questions.
Good.
But I want to say ahead of time, my biggest reason to be here is to tell you that all of us have endured probably more anxiety in life and in business in the last 4 or 5 months than many people have in a lifetime. So you're not alone in your anxiety, whether it's your boss or it's Joan and I, or it's, you're a hairdresser who can't do any work. All of us are in the same anxiety-ridden bucket. So I'm here to tell you that I believe there has never been more opportunity for the executive support profession to grab and grow the profession than right now. So my message is going to be that I'm going to beat that drum and talk to you about why it is the most hopeful and opportunistic time, really, that we may have had as a profession. So that's my message, and I'll let Joan move ahead with questions.
I got you here, I know. And I have it all written down, the 5 key areas we want to talk about, but I also have a lot of notes. And oh my gosh, so we've got to get going. So we're going to get started. We're going to let it flow. And so the first thing actually is kind of what you were leading to, Leni, and you've said to me several times, that assistants really need to seize the opportunity right now. In our background conversations have been like we're with so many assistants working from home and some of them feeling left out, their executives not including them, others are being highly leveraged and not knowing where this is all going to fall out. So can you really build on that about why you feel so strongly this is the opportunity, and in what areas do they need to take advantage, such as you said, listening and communications and the virtual relationship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really been interesting to me to watch. I have clients with whom I'm very close, and one in particular where we've placed the 6 members of their senior team for their senior people. But what I've noticed is that the team itself has become closer, and that's because they have daily Zoom meetings together. And when they were in the big fancy offices on the top of the Salesforce building, they were on 2 different floors. They didn't see each other all the time. So one of the silver linings for that particular team has been they have stayed in close touch and they feel more connected than they ever did. But the other feedback that I'm getting from not only from them, but from others that I've talked to is the virtual relationship affords the possibility of creating a true partnership with the executive. And how does that happen? How that happens is that the executive often doesn't know what you do for them. So what this affords is the opportunity for you to ask more and more questions proactively about their business goals, about what's on their plate, about what's needed. And within the leadership capacity that has inspired in your way of being with them, you will notice that the relationship becomes less of a hierarchy and more of a partnership. So that's the biggest potential, is that the role itself can become more and more of a partnership rather than a reactive executive assistant. It's a proactive, perhaps even executive business partner. And the executive business partner title is something that has been coined by Google here on the West Coast. And they created that because they didn't want there to be a hierarchical relationship between their executives and their assistants.
Wow.
So it is a role title that we're hearing more and more in our search practice. And it's a hybrid role really between a chief of staff and a high-level EA to CEO. And these are the people making the six figures, and these are the people leading the profession. So I believe that all of you who are working virtually are being given the opportunity to move and leverage your role into a partnership role in spite of, but because of not being in the office.
So can you build on that with some specific tips for them? Because I know, like you said, maybe the daily communications, or, having that 5-minute, I'm big on a 5-minute daily huddle with your executive, whether by phone or by Zoom, or even on the phone. I know with my group, when we were working from home, I wanted to do FaceTime with them because I wanted to see their face. I didn't want to just talk on the phone. But what about, I know what some of them are going to already ask you, Leni. My executive doesn't respond to my emails as it is. They don't acknowledge me. How do I actually get their attention?
That's always the question in any relationship, right?
Well, even if we're in the office.
But I have a motto. I have a motto. I always say, the pain of the present has to get bigger than people's resistance to change.
Wow, can you say that again? I know they're going to want to write that down.
The pain of the present, I'm talking about the executive. For the executive, the pain of the present has to get bigger than his or her resistance to change. So what I mean is, the habit of not wanting to talk to their assistant, or the habit of not feeling as though that's valuable time spent, the pain of not getting the support they need has to get bigger than their resistance to following your orders, so to speak, or your requests. So one of the most critical pieces of virtual support is communication. And I think Joan sent you our practices that we wrote for great virtual support. And the first one is communication, and that's no accident, because it's up to you as the professional to learn to communicate very strongly, and in a way, of course, that's gracious, and in a way, of course, that's comfortable for that executive to hear. But there has to be a certain amount of communication that is a request that cannot be ignored. And daily or weekly communication, depending on how long you've known the person, has to happen, or you cannot do your jobs virtually. Because when you were in the office, they could walk in and you'd know what kind of mood they were in, or you'd overhear phone conversations, or you'd know this, or you'd know that. All of that information is gone. So you will be completely in the dark unless you request information, or unless you have a highly communicative executive, which is rare. I mean, because they have so much going on, the squeaky wheel will always get the grease. So I would say, Joan, in answer to your questions, communication. And each executive is different, and each assistant is different in terms of their styles and what they're capable of doing. But you have to somehow have consistent communication where you can have the courage and the confidence to ask the questions you need to be able to leverage your support of that person. Your only goal is to make that person's work and life easier, to make their work more productive and less stressful. But you have to get the information you need in order to do that. The hardest thing in the world is when somebody starts a job in these times and they haven't spent any face time with that person. And we've had situations, which I will talk more about at Joan's conference, where we had one scenario where the person did it in a way that worked for the communication and another didn't. And the two end stories of that and what happened. But number one is communication in terms of requesting information that you need to support that person. And the other thing is to constantly be looking within that communication for needs that can be filled that are really strategic in nature, such that you're thinking ahead enough in your questioning to know that this person is going to be needing 3 weeks from now something along the lines of a project, blah, blah, blah. And you're helping that person to stay on track with their timeline. Now, they didn't ask you to do that, but you're doing that. And that's called strategic support, right? So I think being proactive, being strategic, and that communication, and also asking the hard questions like, what do you need from me that I'm not giving you? That's always hard because you like to think you're giving them everything, right? But what do you need from me that I'm not giving you? So the more communication you can do, and the more strategic thinking, proactive thinking, thinking out of the box, creativity rules right now. Innovation rules. The old way of working doesn't work anymore. In my business, in Joan's business, in your business, in everybody's business. So I think the important thing to know is that everybody is anxious, but there is great opportunity in chaos. And we're at the peak of a wave of change where there is a lot of opportunity for each of us to have creativity and ways of working that we had never considered before. But in many ways, you have to be the leader in that relationship for your executive. So it's a blessing and a curse in a way, but the blessing is that you can be the one that then moves up in value for that executive in a way that will benefit you relative to your career, but also be of great benefit to him or her.
Oh. Gosh, this is so good. I'm taking all my notes too. As you're I'm thinking, like, we really needed 2 hours today, like, because each of these facets you're mentioning, we could expand upon,
right,
or expand on, and just that one piece with the communications. I mean, I always say it's the words a person uses. I'm always, trying to emphasize with assistants, one word could change the whole thing. And so, because sometimes assistants will wonder, well, why does that assistant always seem to get what she needs or wants? Well, how is she saying it? What is she saying? Is she using persuasion skills? I mean, it's very deep, right? Mm-hmm. And you also said, gosh, I'm making notes all over the place here. I know when we were talking, with the communication piece, you told me the other day, listening, it needs to be amped up in a virtual relationship. Can you talk about the listening aspect?
Listening is an art, and great assistants listen without thinking they know what they're going to hear. And, one of the biggest, I think, rabbit holes people get in is they think, oh, well, he always or she always says this, or he always or she always does this. And then they're kind of midwifing the conversation into what they believe is going to happen. But in this day and age, you have an executive that has no idea as to what they're doing tomorrow. They don't have any idea when this is over. They don't have any way of replicating what they used to do. So listening becomes uniquely important at the level of opening your mind, not thinking you already know, even if you've been working for this executive for a year or more. Do not assume you know what they're going to say. So when you ask a question, you want to keep a beginner's mind, an open mind, and just really listen and let them finish their sentence. Don't think that you know already what the end of that sentence is going to be, which is hard for any of us, especially I think for those of us that love to interact with people. We think, my husband's always saying, let me finish. So, and many times he says something I wasn't sure he was going to say. Anyway, so you want to be really careful when you listen. Listen for not only the content, but listen for the way it's being said. Is it anxiety? Is the person kind of not knowing what to say, so they're filling up the sentence? Really try and get the 3D of what's being said and not think you know what is being said. I read a book when email first came out, and it said that email is only 30% of the way human beings communicate. And what is that? That's content, right? It's just content.
Mm.
And the other 70% is our facial expressions. It's the way we're looking in our eyes. It's, what we're doing with our hair, all of it. So we've been stripped now of, a good high percentage of the way human beings communicate by being virtual. So what does that mean? That means you're listening. When you're listening, and hopefully you're Zooming or FaceTiming with your executives and not just on the phone. But even so, you're not there with them getting that energetic information that you do. So listening becomes critical.
Yeah, I love that you included the whole body part of it. And that's why I always talked about human moments for 30 years. I always told assistants, you have to have human moments. You have to have the face-to-face, even if it's 5 minutes in the morning. But now it's more important than ever. And it's amazing how many people, a whole other subject, Zoom, don't want to put their faces up. Even when I'm doing a webinar training session, it's like, put your face up. I mean, the visual is so important, our expressions, right, and all of it. So again, that's a whole other lesson, and we're going to move on. So someone had asked earlier, what were the 5 topics we were going to speak on? So really quick, and we'll move on to the second one, but the first one we had on our marketing piece was seizing the opportunity. Second is focusing on taking a leadership role, which Leni did talk about briefly. We'll touch on that a little more. Number 3, proactively and strategically adding value. I think that's very important. Number 4, she touched on kind of right now a little bit, the transparent and consistent communication. So that was kind of weaved in with our number 1. And then the 5th one has to do with the soft skills being more important than ever. So let's go back a minute to number 2. Can you expand a little bit on how they could take more of that leadership role right now during these times, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I guess the easiest way to say it is that in many ways, executive assistants have always led the relationships with their executives. We always say that a good executive can train an executive in being supported at the level that he doesn't know or she doesn't know she can have. So in other words, really strong assistants who are at the top of their game have the capacity to go into a CEO, even who hasn't ever been supported properly, and train them in being supported. So that takes leadership. What does that mean? Leadership is a strength that can be cultivated. You're not a natural leader necessarily. It can be cultivated. But one of the ingredients that's critical is honesty. It's direct communication. It's not being afraid to push back and not being afraid to make mistakes. So all of those things are probably present in the people you're supporting, but they're even more present, in my opinion, in high-level executive business partners and executive assistants. They are really qualities required to virtually lead the relationship. So let's just start with communication. So the ability to somehow request and receive enough communication back from an executive so that you know how to support them most effectively really requires you to have the courage to communicate honestly and directly. And that's not easy for some people. I mean, I'm a people pleaser, and it's been hard all my life to really be direct with people if I think it might offend them or hurt their feelings. But frankly, this is a time when, however your style works in the relationship, you can't really afford to be shy or in any way non-transparent in your communication. So number one is communication, but the other is the ability to create processes and systems that work in the virtual relationship. You know, the way you used to support that person in the office is going to be different than now. So I think in terms of leadership, you are going to be the one called to really create the communication in such a way that there is direct and open communication, number one. And number two, because you're in a support role, you want to create processes that work for your executive, but they may well be different than the ones you had in the office. And you're going to need to get buy-in from the executive for those processes. These are both leadership roles that are required. But I think the biggest thing of all is the ability to understand what your leader is going through in terms of the anxiety and the not knowing, so that you can support, really almost as a thought leader, some of the anxiety that he or she is having. And you can't do that unless you require some level of communication on a daily or weekly basis. But the leadership role is really just realizing the power you have to create support through your training of that executive as to how to best use you.
Excellent, thank you. So going to our third topic, and I'm seeing some really good comments, and there will be a lot of questions for you. The number 3, proactively and strategically adding value. And I'd also like us to touch on, Leni, I know we've been focusing a lot on so many assistants working from home, but I've also been talking, with some of the assistants I know well that are at high levels now and going back to their offices. And of course, that's a very different situation as well. They have like 20% of the workforce back. Everything feels weird and strange, and their executives have just, the weight of the world on their shoulders. So could we address that, or could you address that, kind of in both arenas? If you're back at work, because it's going to be different, right? I mean, that your workplace isn't what it was in January. And then I know it doesn't matter wherever you work, right? Whether you're virtual or not virtual, as an assistant, I should be adding strategic value. I don't know if people really understand what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Okay, well, let's just start with strategic value, and then we'll go into the workplace. But strategic value is different for each industry, for each executive. For somebody in private equity, strategic value might mean really staying closely aware of the deals on that person's plate and being able to, schedule people according to how important and how close to filling or completing the deal your executive is. So that might be strategic, because you're aware that he needs to see Mary more importantly than he needs to see Jim, just based on the deal flow. So that's a strategic way of looking. Now, if you happen to work for, let's say, a CEO of a global company who's really, got all kinds of meetings across continents and across time zones, and is really overburdened with the amount of work he or she has. You're trying to strategically save that person time for creativity. So you're not scheduling those meetings back to back just because. So enough about the burden that CEO has on his plate to be able to say, I scheduled 20 minutes for you to just sit and meditate or think or do whatever. That's a strategic act that he didn't think of and he wouldn't have asked for, or she. So strategy comes in many different forms, but it always means that you're doing things above and beyond what the person expects relative to saving them time, increasing productivity, or increasing peace of mind. You know, those are things that if you function strategically, and sometimes it might be as little as running a sandwich into somebody's office because, you know, they haven't eaten all day. I mean, that could be, you know, that could be a strategic move. Very, very different level than perhaps thinking about the board meeting that's coming up in 6 months and starting to get working on that. But you have to really realize that a lot of times executives have no idea as to what you possibly can do. And the only way you can show them how is to get enough information so that you can move in a way that's above and beyond their expectations. So that's number one. But number two, in terms of where we work, that is like such a huge question, isn't it? You know, I believe that the people that are back in the office have to be really present to just the moment. In other words, the flexibility required, like you walk in and nobody's there except a few people. So your first reaction is to go, this is weird. I don't like this. Well, yes, but everything's going to be strange in the beginning. So if you can learn to manage your mind in a situation like that well enough to say, wait a minute, my job is to make my executive's job easier. My job is to support that person in any way I can. So really, the only thing you can do in a very uncomfortable situation like that is to manage your own mind's reaction. Where are all the people? Well, they're not there. Okay, let it go. Don't follow that thought, right? So it becomes, for all of us in this day and age, we have to manage our own minds. And I do that by staying present to this day only. In other words, I can't think ahead the way I used to. I used to be able to plan 6 months ahead, but I don't know exactly what's going to be needed of me tomorrow, except for some projects that I'm working on. So I think that would be my answer to, you know, if you are in an office, be flexible, manage your own reactions to the feeling of strangeness, and just put your focus right back on your executive. How can I help? That person's feeling weird too. So what can I do to ease that person? So the minute you take your mind off your own mind and start again thinking about your executive, you will be more comfortable.
Very good. And I have another thought too while you were talking, you know, in relation to this. There are many of you, I mean, we have, wow, over 1,500 on this webinar right now. And I know several thousand will watch the replay because of the registrations we got. So at some point, if you're not back at your office yet, you are going to go back to your office. I mean, whether it's 2 months from now, 4 months from now, 6 months from now. And the title of this webinar, you know, that Leni had for us, the way we work is changing our you. So one thing I am passionate about, talking about being proactive. I like assistants. I like you to be as proactive as you can and not be so reactive, although today we have to be very reactive. But the idea is, if you're not going back for a few months, what are you doing now, though, in these next few months to prepare yourself mentally for when you go back, instead of waiting to the day you show up and now there's all this weirdness? Or what are you doing skill-wise, you know, right, Leni? So I believe that in this time, don't think this is the time, well, I'm just vegging out on the couch because I'm working from home and I don't have much to do. To me, this is a time, as you said, utilize this time, take advantage of this opportunity to prepare yourself. So when you go back in, you're ready to roll, because I know a lot of assistants have said when they go back in, there's going to be so much backlog and rescheduling and doing all of this, right, Leni? So what could assistants be doing right now if they are working from home? They're not, you know, overwhelmed. How should they be preparing themselves? Because the day will come back that they're going to go back, even if it's just 2 days a week, you know?
Yeah. I read an article yesterday, Joan, that 82% of a certain number of leaders that were surveyed said that there would always be some level of virtual work as far as they were concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's part-time, full-time, 2/3 time, 1/3 time, so, how to prepare for whatever happens, whether all of a sudden you have to go back 2 days a week, or I understand some companies are doing mornings, some companies are doing, separating it into mornings and afternoons, but every company will do it differently. So what does that mean? And really, your executives are having the same conversations we're having. So what it means to me is that I can no longer dictate exactly how I'm going to work. And, I think all of us, Joan and I were talking before you came, we all like to have this illusion of control about our lives. That's a human condition. We always want to feel, oh, yes, I'm in charge. But guess what? Along came the virus. And, a certain number of years ago, along came the Great Depression in their time. So we actually don't have as much control as we think we do. So what does that mean? How do we prepare for the fact that we don't know what it's going to be like next year or next month? We just don't know. And, your executive is facing the same thing. So how do we deal with that? I think the best way to deal with that is to amp up your ability to be flexible, to amp up your ability to go with the flow, to amp up your awareness that any of us really are not in control of external events. The only thing we can control is our reaction to them. So the more you can control your minds and your reactions to external events, and the more you can make decisions to change old habits and to move into new ways of working, whatever way you do that. Some people do, they exercise more and they get more flexible. Some people, meditate. Some people do certain, videos of how to change. Tony Robbins, whatever it takes to strengthen your inner self with the ability to be flexible and to move in whatever direction is most helpful to the profession. Those are going to be the people that survive and thrive in this new world. And if you are in a place where you go, no, I always work this way, or I always work that way, it's not going to keep up for any of us. I mean, I can't do it either. I've been in the business for actually 40 plus years. And I don't even begin to think I'm going to do my business the way I did last year or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Because what I've seen that everything changes all the time. There used to be secretaries. Then along came word processors. Then along came computers, personal computers then after that. And then now we have artificial intelligence. But guess what? Every time there was a change, this profession changed itself and grew into something more and more valuable. And that's what we have to do. And the only way to do that is to be flexible, be open to change, and to become more and more strong in our sense of who we are as professionals.
Very good. And I know this is going to be, we're going to have even more interesting conversations. So our live virtual conference is October 27th to the 30th. And I'll talk more about that at the end. And Leni was going to be speaking. We were going to do the live event. Now it's just virtual, but we will be live. And Leni, I can only imagine by October, you're going to have a lot more new information to offer, right? We've got 3 more months, whatever, to go. And we're going to have even more to talk about and more to talk in terms, in terms of how the profession is being impacted and the future and what we're seeing. And so it's going to be really interesting, right, when we connect again in October and we're talking to the assistants out there and what we're going to be also talking about at that time. So I'm going to go to questions because I know there's a lot of questions and I would like to get in as many as we can today. So Malia, we'll wait for Malia to come on. All right, Malia, go ahead. I'll let you read you could go ahead and read the questions.
Okay, we have plenty of questions for you. Okay, Jody would like to know, how can you gain the momentum if your executive is going elsewhere and she is not on site all the time?
How do you gain momentum if your executive is not on site? Gain momentum in terms of support, I imagine she's saying.
I'm assuming.
Gain momentum when
she's saying she's not always on site.
Oh, when she's not always on site. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think, again, it goes back to the innovation and focus on what communication is needed with that executive. And not being on site just means there has to be more, whether it's texting, email, or phone, or Zoom, there has to be an amping up of communication. I mean, that's what we talked about earlier. Communication has to be the responsibility, your responsibility to make it happen. Because that executive is not going to be proactive about communicating as a rule. Just keep that in mind. And it doesn't mean they don't like you or they don't want to talk to you, but they've got too much else that they're thinking about. So it has to be your responsibility to proactively create the kind of communication that executive is comfortable with, but it has to be a lot.
Okay. Jean, thank you, by the way, Leni. Jean says, my executive says, quote, make me better, support at a higher level. However, they don't tell her what areas. I've asked and I get a general answer, oh, just keep me on track, but they don't share information and they won't keep me in the loop. I finally begged for weekly huddles and finally got them, but no help. How do you support or keep on track when they won't identify which areas?
Right. That's such a good question. That's one of my favorite questions to answer. When I interview a CEO to determine what her or his needs are, I'm going to just say her and then his. I'll just go back and forth.
Yeah.
I would never, ever ask a CEO what I can do to help or what do they need? Tell me what you need. I would never ask that question because they would look at me like they were a deer in the headlights. They don't know how to say it. They don't know. So what do? I ask them questions that are really related to things they can answer. So for example, I would say, tell me more about where you believe you're wasting the most time every day. When you go home and shake your head and say, I can't believe how much time I wasted, blah, 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 blah. That's a question. Tell me what is the strongest, biggest thing in your mind over the next 6 months. What are you really thinking about? What at this point in time are you worried about? Is there something coming up that you're worried about? Questions have to be pointed at where their pain points are so that you begin to see where you can be of help, because they will not be able to tell you. They don't really know what you do enough. And more importantly, they don't know what you're capable of doing. So in order to really amp up your value, you have to ask enough questions. And this is where I mean about transparency and being direct. It's not easy to ask people. Like I even ask people what their biggest weakness is. I'll ask a CEO that. What's your biggest weakness? And they know. That's my biggest weakness. I can't do this or I can't do that. Or I'll say, what do the people closest to you say is your biggest strength as a leader? So we know that, but you never want to, you don't want to ever expect them to tell you what they need. That's if you don't remember anything else I've said, you have to ask the questions necessary to get the information so that you know how to support the person.
And to build on that with Leni, I'm so glad you actually scripted verbiage, because I know assistants really struggle, like, what are the exact words I use, right? And there was a really good book that was going around corporate America, way, way back. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It was QBQ, so the question before the question. And the premise of the book was the reason why we don't get the answers we want sometimes is because we didn't ask the right question. So I think it's that same example, right? I could say, oh, do you have anything I could help you with today? Well, the quick answer is, oh, no, I'm fine, right? You said if you change the question, you'll probably get a different answer. I remember one assistant said to me years ago that made me think differently is, how can I get that started for you? Instead of saying, can I help you with that? Which I could have said, oh, no, that's all right. When she said, how can I start that for you? How can I get that started? All of a sudden, my thinking changed and I came up with an answer. So I think this is a really good point.
Yeah, Joan, let me just interrupt you just for a minute so I don't, but I remember I had an executive tell me once, Leni, find me somebody who will support me in the way I need to be supported, not in the way she wants to support me.
Ah, that's really insightful.
And it's really true, because sometimes there's a sense that all sizes, fit one person, and they don't. So a big thing that a really top level assistant does is they're almost a chameleon in terms of their type of support that they give the person. They learn the person. And learning people is harder when it's virtual, and you just have to accept that.
Very good. So I don't know, the camera's getting weird all of a sudden. Leni,
Yeah,
you're fine, but you're getting grainy. Not your fault. That's webinar jam. So if anybody else is seeing that for right now, just hang in there, because it hopefully will just switch back. But as long as you could hear her as well. All right, the next question.
Certainly. Claudia wants to know, how do you grow the relation to the next level with your executive when you're working remotely, not COVID related? I've been working remotely with him for 2 years now. He's based in France. I'm in Canada. We used to have face-to-face meetings 3 to 4 times per year, but now with COVID, it's less than that.
Yeah, boy, that is, but it's no different than if she were these days, if she were in San Francisco and the person was sitting where I'm sitting in Sausalito. I mean, that distance has become shorter, and the virtual relationship is the virtual relationship. So the answer to the question really is back to beginning to understand the business of the business. So she's been supporting, or I'll just speak, it's Claudia, right?
Yes.
So Claudia, you've been supporting this person for 2 years. That person's job has changed dramatically in 2 years. So the question I would ask myself if I were you is, do I know what this person's job is right now? What are they doing? What's on their plate? What is the business of the business they're doing? So if I were you, I would ask for a meeting with this person on Zoom, and I would say, I want to reboot our relationship. It's been 2 years, and you've changed, and I've changed, and the way I support you has pretty much stayed the same, but I feel like I want to contribute more to you. So I want a meeting with you. And in that meeting, I would have a list of questions that really have to do with understanding, what, in fact, I'd be happy to send you a sort of redacted copy of what I ask my executives, if you'd like it, so that you have a template. But at any rate, what are you primarily involved with? What do you plan to do over the next 6 months in terms of your work? Any questions you can ask to have an understanding of what's on his plate will allow you to better help him strategically. And of course, don't ask the question, how can I help you?
That was very good. Okay, Leni, Marjorie wants to know if you have any advice to manage executive support and homeschooling. Schools are not reopening in California next month.
Wow, that is such a big subject. And, I have a friend who consults for senior executives in Silicon Valley, and they just got there, and it's a huge global tech company, and she's coaching the CEO and the C-level executives. And they just did a survey for all of their employees to see how they were doing. And the people that came back with the most stress were the people who had 2 jobs in the family, both parents were working, and the children were ages 11 and under. So, Marjorie, I don't know how old your children are, but if they are 11 and under, you're in the most stressed group of all, according to my friend. So, for me, and you may have already done this, but, we used to live in a culture where being parents and being a worker were separated. And right now, they're integrated, which has its silver lining, but it also has a real challenge. But I would say that the most important thing you could do is talk to your employer and let them know that between the hours of X and Y, you are going to be homeschooling. You plan to make up that time at a different time when the children are asleep or when the children are, being entertained by something else, but that you're not going to be available for work during those hours, because the stress is created by thinking you have to do both at once, and then you don't do either one to your satisfaction, right? I would imagine. So the big thing is, again, communication. I need you to know that my hours are going to be this and that. And if there's something urgent, always feel free to text me and I will get back to you as quickly as possible. But, these are the hours I'm going to be available for my children, and these are the hours I'm going to be available for you. So if that doesn't work for you, let me know and I'll try and make other arrangements. But somehow get yourself in a place when you're with those children, you're with those children, and when you're with your job, you're with your job. Otherwise, it's really chaotic.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that's where the communication, the setting healthy boundaries. You've got to set boundaries both, and I was a working mother. I mean, when my kids were little and I didn't work from home, but the point is I did still set boundaries even with my children. So I think it's, depending on what age your children are, they also have to understand they just can't run in anytime they want into mommy's office or workspace. So I feel you still also have to teach your children too. Now, if they're 2 or 3, they're not going to get it. But, like they're my grandchildren's age, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, when Brian was working from home a lot, he told the kids, look, from 8 to 5, I'm in the bedroom, I'm doing this. That's where his office was set up. And, I'm not here basically, So I think it's that combination, right, in determining what those boundaries are that have to be set that are going to work from you. I mean, maybe you're going to be really productive from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. So you're still putting in maybe the same hours, and then you're going to school the kids but that's where, again, Leni, right? You've got to communicate with your executive. You have to come to terms and an agreement. And the other idea I wanted to throw out when you were talking about the other question and the virtual working from home all the time, I did work with an executive and his assistant this year, and they're all the time, even when they're in their office, her physical office is in a whole other building on the campus. But what they do is they purposely set time aside, maybe it's 2 times a month or every week. I don't know if it was 1 day a week, where they purposely physically go get together and meet. So just because you're working from home virtually doesn't mean you can't go have coffee at Starbucks together. I mean, that's what I would do. Or I would say, tell my executive, let's go meet and let's have a lunch meeting. So just because you're working from home, it doesn't mean, and you can't maybe go back to your office, it doesn't mean you can't meet those somewhere else. So this is, again, where Leni was saying you have to be creative right now. You have to be innovative. You have to look for other ways. You have to look for ways of working differently. So then those were all the main points Leni was bringing out early in our webinar today. So, all right, another question. I think we have time for one more, maybe, Malia, let's see, depending on how lengthy it is.
Okay. Vanessa says my executive needs constant reminding. Sorting out things prior to deadlines isn't her best act. How do I help her with that? Because constant reminding hasn't done as much as I would wish.
This sounds like it might have a technological answer. I can't. If I could speak with Vanessa, I would say, well, I assume you've tried creating a text 10 minutes before the call or 10 minutes before the event. I assume, because text certainly is a way that most of us gets our attention right away because we've got that phone in our hand, right? But assuming that the texting didn't work, I think what you have to do is have a one-on-one conversation with the person and say, look, nothing's worked. I would like to research an app for your phone that will allow you to be reminded at a level that is tolerant for you and that you'll respond to. And if I can find such a thing, would you let me put it on your calendar? I mean, that's the only thing I can figure out, because most people that I talk to at a high level have an arrangement with their executive, and they create that arrangement early on and say, okay, if I do this, I know you'll look at it. Okay, so, and I'm not going to do this unless you have to look at it. So what you want to do is create some system. And if you've been texting 15 minutes before the appointment or whatever it is, and they're still not responding, then for whatever reason that doesn't work, right? So then I would say I need to have a one-on-one with you, and we need to talk about the reminding system that I need to create for you. And don't make that person wrong. Don't make your executive wrong for not responding, but rather saying, I'm really excited to find a solution for this challenge. So let's have a talk about what isn't working, and then I'm going to figure out what will work. And then you have to go do that.
Excellent. I love it. So a couple of things stay on if you can, everyone. So there's just a couple of things. We'll try to add another question in here. If any of you could stay on like maybe 2 or 3 minutes extra, we'll take another question. But if you have to leave us, there's 2 things I want to be sure to mention. One, well, first of all, Leni, we're going to give away 2 copies of your book. So her book is, again, Finding Right Work. So Malia, can you tell us who the 2 winners are? And then the book will be coming directly from Leni.
I can. I have Terry Hall
and
Terry Goldsmith.
Lori, yay, congratulations. So Malia will get you their names and information. So yeah, very, very exciting. But if you didn't win, you could certainly look up Leni's book. And Leni, you told me the other day that there's a website just for the book, or would you rather they go to your EA search?
Well, either way, it's easier to remember, findingrightwork.com. But if you go to easearch.com, there is a link to the book. And it's a pretty interesting website in terms of resources as well. So easearch.com or findingrightwork.com. And the whole title, Finding Right Work, the 5 Steps to a Life You Love. And it's I think, a book that you would enjoy reading, even if you love your profession. There are always ways to make it better.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then let's see the other announcement, and then we'll take another question. Again, if you could stay on, we're good for a couple more minutes. So as I mentioned, our annual conference for administrative excellence will be offered virtual this year, live virtual. We did move our live in-person event to next year. We'll be announcing those dates soon, but we're going to have so many amazing presenters. In addition to Leni, we have Lucy Brazier, who's amazing. She's going to be sharing with us a lot about what she's seen globally in the profession and actually how they're trying to move toward titles that or levels for assistants that'll be recognized all over the world. We're going to really dig into your career, specifically getting into the meat, how important your digital profiles are going to be now more so than ever. How do you really show your value? What are we expecting for the future in this profession? And we've made it very cost effective for you because we know you're all watching this year. So it's $395 for the 2.5 days. And we have a really cool platform that you're going to be able to network live with people all over the world. There's a networking room, there's an exhibit hall. So some really cool stuff. And we're going to add some fun activities and possibly a little entertainment even. And if you sign up between July 16th and July 24th, you will receive 4 of my micro webinars for free. And the 4 are decision making for assistants, setting healthy boundaries, be business savvy, and setting yourself apart. All right. And I believe, and you can go to OfficeDynamicsConference.com to get your ticket. Okay, do you want to do one more question, Leni? Are you up for one more?
Sure.
Okay, one more.
Pardon me. Lisa says, admins of all levels are working longer. What would you say to older executive/senior level admins on competing for positions in this day and age, especially since we got into the industry, degrees were not always required?
That's a great question too. All of us, because we grew up in this country, have issues around aging and around, am I getting too old? Am I doing, it's just the culture. And what I say to them is this: with the experience that you have under your belt, people who are right out of school with those degrees could not possibly compete with you. You are going to be applying for jobs that you will get and be able to do because of your experience. And frankly, if I have a search and somebody says we need a degree, I'll say, okay, tell me why. And you can always push back if somebody says, well, you don't have a degree. Tell me why you need a degree. Well, they'll say, I want problem solving. I want really good written communication. I want good organizational skills. I want research skills. And you, I'm sure, have those in spades. So don't be intimidated by the number of years of experience you have, and don't be intimidated by not having a degree. The truth is, your commitment to lifelong learning is much more valuable than a degree in many ways.
Wow, that's really, really good. I love that. What a great way to end, right?
Yes. Leni, can you please repeat the title of your book and your website?
Okay, it's Finding Right Work, 5 Steps to a Life You Love. And the website for the book is findingrightwork.com. And you just click on the butterfly, and then it'll take you to Amazon very quickly. And then they can also go to easearch.com, and then there is a link to the book on the website.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Well, wow. I think we had a really, really good session today. We still have 1,100 people sitting on with us. So that's amazing. And I just want to thank you again, Leni, for all your time, your knowledge, your inspiration, for loving and supporting this profession and doing what you do. I really, really can't wait till we do this again in October, but you're going to be presenting by yourself in October.
Okay, then, but
you'll be good because you'll have all that time to share all of your knowledge.
Yeah.
And we certainly hope to see many of you at our virtual event. So thank you all so much for your time today. And we hope we've left you with some wonderful inspiration and hope and opportunities. So thank
Yeah,
you.
and
Leni.
Joan,
I'll
thank
chat with
you.
you soon.
I want to say, Joan, thank you for all you do for the profession and for having me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Leni, if you
Bye,
could please,
everyone.
Leni, please stay on. I'm gonna end, but please stay on, Leni.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.